I recently found an old extension cord that someone had done some really bad repairs on. It had been damaged in a couple of different places, and for whatever reason they just threw it away instead of repairing it correctly. And it's good heavy duty 12 gauge cord. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this up and get rid of these bad parts, add on some new ends to this, and make us several different extension cords. Now, I can't begin to tell you the amount of times where I've needed a short extension cord, whether that be a 3-foot, 6-foot, 10-foot cord. They just come in incredibly handy, especially when you're setting up saws and stuff like that next to outlets, and you just need a little bit of extension cord, but you don't want to have to pull out a big 50-foot cord. So this is going to be a perfect project for that, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to change out or to repair an extension cord by putting some new ends on it. Now, to make this repair, we're going to need a couple of tools. We're going to be using Kinepix 9511 160s. These are great step cutters for cable cutting. And we're going to use some Klein wire strippers as well as a utility knife. And for the ends of this, we're going to be using some Eaton heavy-duty 15-amp connectors that are good for up to 12-gauge wire. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to get rid of the bad ends, and you can see they made a really awful repair on this. And then about a foot down, we've got some exposed wire here as well. So in the end, this is going to leave us about 10 foot on the end, and we're going to cut the other side down to about 30 feet, somewhere in that neighborhood. So the first thing we want to do is let's get rid of these bad parts. So we'll get that cut off and that one cut off. Throw that to the side. Now, with the Eaton, these particular ones, they're going to have a strip gauge on them too. So it's going to let you know. And most of these types of connectors are going to have insulation strip gauges. So in our case, that's going to be about a 1/2 inch. Now, what we want to do, I'm going to just pull these out for the moment. What we want to do is we want to set this in there so that we can kind of determine where we want to be. So what we want to do is strip to about right here. So we're going to strip off about 3/4 of an inch of the outside jacket. Now, to do that, one of the easiest ways to do that is just kind of bend it over here, and you could take your utility knife and then just kind of score around it a little bit. You don't want to cut through it all the way. You can see that the pressure is actually ripping that jacket apart. So all we're doing is just grazing the knife over it. And then we can flip it in the opposite direction, repeat the process, just continue that score around there, and just the pressure will rip that jacket off where we're not cutting into that bottom wires. That way our insulation stays nice and intact. So now that we've got that off, we're going to cut off these little insulation pieces and get them out of our way. And that is done. Now we want to keep, we want to maintain our strip gauge here. So we were going to strip off about a 1/2 inch on each one of these wires. So in an extension cord, you're usually going to have these 3 colors: white, black, and green. White is your neutral, black is your hot, and green is your ground. So the next step is just to get each one of those stripped off, that 1/2 inch that is recommended for this one. There's our first one, and as we get those stripped off, we want to kind of just twist them over. That way that they don't fray apart on us. We'll get the second one. And the third one. Might not have went quite deep enough on that one, but I think it'll be okay. No, it's pretty close. Okay, so now on these cords also, you have these little tabs that go in here, and you'll see these in a lot of different styles and different brands of connectors, and all these are the cable grabs. And so it's recommended, in fact it says on here, that if your cord is over 0.45 or 0.45 inches, then you'll want to take these out. So if you have a larger jacketed cord, then you have to get rid of them because it just won't close down enough. We're right on the brink of that with this cord. We're right at 7/16 of an inch, so this one should close down pretty easily. Now, what we want to do, the great thing about these too is that they're all inclusive, and so you don't have several parts of these, so we could just fold these ears back, and that gives us great access to get in here to set all these. So the first thing we want to do is set our ground wire. Now, green always goes to ground. Let me get my screwdriver ready. We'll set our ground first, and then we'll just make sure that we tighten this in properly. And as we do each one of these, we want to double check them just to make sure that we have a nice tight connection on them. And then I lost my little insulation piece. So I tell you what, let me get those out of the way for the moment. Now for the other two, you'll see you have a silver connector here, and on the other side it is a brass connector. So the way you do this is black is always to brass, that's your hot line, and white goes to white or silver. Now we'll just bend this over, set the black one in place. We'll get this one tightened up. Double check each one of these as we go, just to make sure that we have a nice solid connection. And now we can bend this over and finally get the last one. And you can see that frayed apart on me a little bit. So we're going to retwist this, get it set in there. And now we can tighten it all up. Again, double check all of your lines to make sure that everything's seated snugly. And I think I got that one just a touch more. Now we can fold this back over. We're going to go ahead and set our cable crimp pieces or our cable grab pieces here, these little plastic components back in here. Set those down. And you can see as we tighten this up how it's going to pinch that cord. That's, you know, we're all guilty of this. You go to pull an extension cord out, and instead of grabbing it by the plug, you just grab it by the cord and pull on it. Well, these are going to help alleviate ripping the cord out of those connectors. So now we'll just take each one of these screws, we'll get them started. We'll go back and forth one side to the other. So we got them seated now. And now we just want to tighten a little at a time on each one to get that cord snugged down evenly until we get the whole thing closed up properly. And when we get done, it'll have a nice clean connection on it, and these will grab that cord evenly so that it's just going to pinch it down correctly. That way, you know, we're not lopsided on one side or the other. And now we have a brand new extension cord in, and we have salvaged this very high dollar cord because these cords are getting more and more expensive as they go. Let me finish the other cord real quick and we'll see if they work. Well, now that I've gotten both ends on this cord, I've got both my male and my female onto this cord. I went and double checked it against one of my saws, and everything worked perfectly. So I was able to take an old cord that somebody had discarded and turned it into two very good cords. This side ended up being 10 foot. The other side ended up being about 32 feet. I know a lot of people get overwhelmed with electrical, but it's really quite simple, especially when you're dealing with 110 volt or 120 volt or 240. With 110, all you have to do to remember is which wires go to which terminals. So it's always going to be black to brass, white to white, and green to ground. The same is true if you're working with an electrical outlet, or excuse me, with an extension cord in like this, or an electrical outlet like this Levington. So it will always be white on the white screw, black on the brass screw, and green on the ground screw. Now, if you're working with electrical outlets, more often than not, you're going to be working with Romex. The only difference with Romex is, first of all, this is for interiors. They do have exterior Romex, but the green wire will not be jacketed is the only difference. So your non-insulated wire is going to be your ground. Your black is your hot lead to the brass, and white your neutral to the white screw. Do that and you're going to be just fine. My name is Ben. You've been watching the Texas Tool Crib. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one.